Well, greetings and salutations, folks. I hope everyone is still doing well, and welcome to this end of the night or second bonus upload. Before we jump into it, a couple quick links. As many of you may know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, and channel membership is in the description below, merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. These audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support the channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It does not cost a cent. Click the like button. Takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of these informative uploads that I put out daily, click the bell icon. And folks, please leave a comment and share the video. Why? Well, because all of these things, they really do help the channel to continue to grow and go. They definitely do matter, and they are appreciated. And with that, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump in to this second and night-ending bonus upload, shall we? Some of the earliest writings we have of the Cynocephali are by the world-renowned Herodotus, known as the father of history from the 5th century BC. In research on this topic, there is a quote, Herodotus, Book 4, "For in the land of these are found both the monstrous serpent, and the lion, and the elephant, and the bears, and the venomous snakes, and horned asses, beside the dog-headed man." Herodotus includes the dog-headed men as if it were a well-understood topic. He assumes the reader must already know of them, just as they know of what a serpent, lion, and elephant are. Interestingly, even though he mentions a race of dog-headed men in Libya, he also states in that same book he does not believe in werewolves. History's Book 4. These men, it would seem, are wizards, for it is said of them by the Scythians and by the Hellenists who have settled in Scythian land that once in every year each of the Norio become a wolf for a few days and then returns again to its original form. For my part, I do not believe them when they say this, but they say it nevertheless and swear to it moreover. Anyone who has read histories by Herodotus knows that he points out when he doesn't believe something, and in this case, it is wizards who turn into werewolves. The fact that he mentions a race of dog-headed men and assumes your knowledge of them, yet speaks out against the folklore of werewolves, is fascinating to anyone paying attention. To any civilian of modern day, believing a race of dog-headed men is just as crazy as werewolves, but for what reason, Herodotus seems to disagree. With more questions than answers from Herodotus, the next few writings await circa 1 century later. So here's something interesting, and I kind of see what Herodotus is talking about, because Native Americans have the shapeshifters, all right, and people automatically, new people to the topic of dogmen automatically assume that these things transform, which throughout years of researching this, we have come to the conclusion that they don't. And through different talks and meeting different people, what he's technically saying is these transformations he doesn't buy the men turning into werewolf bit, but he buys that there's a dog-headed race. There's a race of dog-headed humans, which, because it's historically proven, I buy as well. There's a race in Sumerian text talking about a dog-headed race of aliens. Now, even though God created everything, right? He created the earth, he created everything. He kind of left it alone. We all know that. He just said, I'm just going to give everyone free will. And if shit hits the fan, periodically, I'll stop it. The Great Flood stopping his fallen angels, which we will get into on this as well. So, but he didn't just create us. There were other races of he created the universe. So any other kind of living being in that vast universe, he created as well. And I believe that these creatures, these advanced beings, these demons, these aliens, they use portals to travel. They can either come through these portals with their saucers. I say saucers, but flying ships. That, to me, that's a more logical explanation. And I did an upload the other day talking about how there's a case where a gentleman described how a 42-month journey traveling with extraterrestrial all the way across our solar system takes 42 months, but by them bending space. So one portal, two portal, their universe, or their planet, our planet. Space is bent, portal hit, and it takes 42 months for that short period. But if they were to open space, 100,000 years. I believe these creatures have figured out how to use that and do that. Also, what I believe is with that Sumerian text is this dog-headed race of aliens is the Cynocephali. I believe Dogman is Cynocephali. It's one and the same. It's not some just mythical race of humanoid that just disappeared. We're still seeing them on the planet today. So let's get into it. Cynocephali is a Greek physician and historian best known for his works in Persia and India. He lived in the 5th century BC. These are based on his own experiences as a physician at the court of the Persian king Artaxerxes II. One of his works, he wrote about the Cynocephali in India with quite a bit of detail. Cynocephali. On these, the Indian mountains, there live men with the head of a dog whose clothing is the skin of wild beasts. They speak no language, but bark like dogs, and in this manner make themselves understood by each other. Their teeth are larger than those of dogs. Their nails are those of these animals, but longer and rounder. They inhabit the mountains as far as the river Indus. Their complexion is swarthy. They're extremely just, like the rest of the Indians with whom they associate. They understand the Indian language, but are unable to converse, only barking and making signs with their hands and fingers by way of reply, like a deaf and dumb. They are called by these Indians Kalisteri. In Greek, Cynocephaloi, or Cynocephali, which dog-headed. They live on raw meat in a number about 120,000. They number 120,000. The Cynocephali, or Cynocephali, living on these mountains, do not practice any trade but live by hunting. When they have killed an animal, they roast it in the sun. They also rear numbers of sheep, goat, and ass, drinking the milk of the sheep and whey they have made from it. They eat fruits whence ember is produced. Since it is sweet, they also dry it and keep it in baskets, as the Greeks kept their dry grapes. They make rafts, which they load with this fruit, together with well-cleaned purple flowers and 260 talents of amber, with the same quantity of purple dye and 1,000 additional talents of amber, which they send annually to the king of India. They exchange the rest for bread, flour, and cotton stuffs with the Indians, from whom they also buy swords for hunting wild beasts, bow and arrow, being very skillful in drawing the bow and hurling a spear. They cannot be defeated in war, since they inhabit lofty and inaccessible mountains. Every 5 years the king sends them a present of 300,000 bows, as many spears, 120,000 shields, and 50,000 swords. They do not live in houses, but they live in caves. They set out for their chase with their bows and spears, and as they are very swift by foot, they pursue and soon overtake their quarry. The women have a bath once a month. The men do not bath at all, but only wash their hands. They anoint themselves 3 times a month with oil made from milk and wipe themselves with skins. The clothes of men and women alike are not skins with the hair on it, but skins tanned and very fine. The richest wear linen cloths, but they are few in number. They have no bed, they sleep on leaves or grass. He who possesses the greatest number of sheep is considered the richest. And so in regard to their other possessions, all, both men and women, have tails above their hips like dogs, but longer and much hairier. They are just and live longer than any other men, 170 years, sometimes 200 years. Really quick, anyone who, and I've had these discussions with different people, and I have, like, I'm just like everyone else. If I have a theory and I feel my theory is strong, I will defend it. And I'm guilty of, as everyone is, we are human. And when we feel our theory is right, we'll fight it, I am just as guilty. And, people, I have had arguments with different people that I'm friends with, not, just not some random person. I'm not going to, go and attack somebody. Not arguments, but discussions, I'd say. Never leading into any name calling or anything. And I will share my view. Now, one thing that that anyone who says Cynocephali is not a dogman, that they are different. Cynocephali just described a dogman. Now, people may say, but Jeff, they seem different, but yet very similar, right? Well, there's a history to that, and why. They live on mountains. One, they cannot be defeated in war. 120,000 of them. In that book, Danny Van Drimeny, Them and Us, he describes a dogman, minus the tail. He doesn't put in, he doesn't talk about a tail, but he describes similar description of what a dogman is, minus the tail. But these creatures, their teeth are large. They have nails. They cannot speak, but they bark, which they growl, they bark, they howl. They use their hands. They feed primarily on animals. They tend to stay away from humans, only to give honor to their king. But yet they are, they are not warring with humans, not until later, but they want to be left alone. They live in caves. They don't live in homes. We've seen how he describes it, how Ctesias describes them perfectly capable of building a home. They are capable warriors. They are capable spear throwers. If they can throw a spear and fight with swords and use their hands, they could use hammer and nail. But they choose to live in caves because it's where they are most comfortable. Dogmen, we know, do not live in any kind of other structures, mainly caves or even abandoned, buildings, dwellings, whatever. But similarities. Ctesias goes into more detail on this strange race of men. Speaking of their communication methods, their engineering, their commodities, tradings, weapon choice, housing, self-care, clothing, and wealth and lifespan, his writings are both praised and ridiculed in modern works. But for roughly 1,000 years, his works were highly regarded. Still, there are more controversial works than his from this century. Sometimes after the requests that Ctesias accompanied his king, for Alexander the Great tore his way through armies and conquered much of the known world. And a quote from Sam Otwell, Soulsby, from the University of Cambridge, developing out of the Greek pseudo. A letter of Alexander to Aristotle was highly popular in the medieval Latin West, while the first Latin manuscript dates to the 9th century. Quotations elsewhere indicate that it had been translated from Greek by the 7th century. In a letter, Alexander the Great recounts his adventures in India to his tutor, including an encounter with the Cynocephali/Dogman. In this quote he provides. Next, we found a grove full of huge Cynocephali who tried to harass us, but they began to flee when we shot our arrows. Now, as we are entering the deserted area, the Indians reported that there is nothing more worth seeing. Although the letter was held in high regard by historians for hundreds of years, it has since come under scrutiny, and its authenticity has become a debated topic. This being said, even if the letter was not truly written by Alexander the Great himself, it remains a document providing evidence for the belief in such creature as the Cynocephali, held under considerable less scrutiny, however. Magathenus was yet another author of this century who wrote on the subject. Magathenus was a great Greek historian, diplomat, who lived in the 4th century BC, best known for his work in Indica, which is a description of India based on his own experiences as a diplomat at the court of Chandragupta Maurya, the first emperor of the Maurya Empire. In his writings, he describes the Cynocephali as a race, as a friend to the Indian nation. But really quick, I want to touch on something here. And I talked about this in the live, and I described, someone had asked, or I had stated the reason why they now live and do and live how they do now. And I said, even though the king of India described them as like a great warriors, that was not meant as like warrior. They were great hunters. And if there was a war, he felt like he could rely on this race of dog-headed humans or dog-headed men that live in his mountains. So he bestowed upon them all of those weapons, right? The fact of it is they were not a warring tribe of men and women and children. They were not. And they were very skilled swordsmen. They were very skilled at archery. So when Alexander and the Macedonian Empire and warriors came and started, throwing spears and launching arrows at them, they ran. If they hadn't run, what would have happened? They were very peaceful. And Marco Polo talks about that too, which we will get into later. But if you push something so far, it does one of two things. It either snaps and wipes you out, or it snaps, tries to wipe you out, loses, and then just retreats and becomes feral. Magnus. On different mountains in India, there are tribes of men with dog-shaped heads, armed with claws, clothed with skins, who speak not in the accents of human language, but only bark, and have fierce grinning jaws. Magnus' writings would go on to be referenced by many scholars for more than thousands of years, even today. And his is mentioned of the Cynocephali. It was quoted and or referenced by a medical scholar such as Pliny the Elder. These accounts of Cynocephali living in India are intriguing to say the least, but India is not the only location we hear of these creatures in 4th century BC. Berosus writes of them beginning in Babylonia, according to others he had spoken to. So Babylonia, modern-day Iraq. Berosus. In the land of Babylonia, there is a race of men who have the heads of dogs and the bodies of men. They are said to be very wise and able to predict the future. Berosus was a Babylonian priest and astronomer who lived in the 3rd century BC. He is best known for his works, Babylonica, which is the history of the Babylonia from the creation of the world to his own time. Manetho was an Egyptian priest of the god of Hephaestus in the delta of Egypt, who lived during the Ptolemaic kingdom in the early 3rd century BC. He is best known for his works, The History of Egypt in Greek, which is the only surviving comprehensive ancient Egyptian history known from that period. In the very writing, he spoke of the Cynocephali living in the land of Punt in Africa. Manetho. In the land of Punt, which is located in Africa, there is a race of men who have heads of dogs and bodies of men. They are said to be very intelligent and to be able to speak the language of the Puntanese. Manetho's work was popular in the ancient world. It was translated into Latin and Syriac and is used by later historians such as Joseph and Eusebius. Some scholars claim inaccuracies in his writing, but his works, along with the rest of these sources, aren't foolproof arguments on their own. But collectively, they do. You have all of these works that, you have this from this guy, this from that guy, this from this guy, this from that guy, all from different parts of the world, different cultures, different traditions. One account is one account. When you have 10, then you get a painting. Then you have a picture of something that truly exists. It's kind of hard to, you got 10 different people saying one thing. You have one person, you can kind of, hey, how good is your credibility? But then you have 10 people that say the same thing, talk about the same thing in different cultures. It's kind of hard to disregard at that point, I'd say. I mean, for me, it is. 1st century BC /AD, Pliny the Elder, Pompeius, Malaya, Strabo, Pliny the Elder. Roman author, naturalist, and natural philosopher, best known for his works, Naturalis Historia, an encyclopedia of the natural world. That is one of his most comprehensive works of the kind back in ancient world. Pliny the Elder, Natural History, 7.2, 40 through 41. On many of the mountains, again, there is a tribe of men who have heads of dogs and clothe themselves in the skin of wild beasts. Instead of speaking, they bark, and furnished with claws. They live by hunting and catching bird, according to a story as given by Cleotus. The number of these people is more than 120,000. Pliny affirms references by Cleotus, quoting his work on mentioning of 120,000. Pliny chooses to point out the clothing communication method in form of hunting, much as Cleotus. Interesting to recognize that he read Cleotus said about the Cynocephali, but only said a fraction of the things. This could be for various reasons, but ultimately we might never know. Pliny writes by many fantastical so-called monstrous races, which many point to as the reason to doubt his writings, but Pliny wasn't the type to accept anything he heard. So Pliny was not, he wrote about some strange things, but he was not a guy that just, hey, I saw down in the sewer by the bathhouses, there was this four-headed salamander with 6 toes. He wouldn't be like, He would go out and see if it was there, or find many other people to tell him, hey, I saw that too. But different people that didn't know A, they were just B, C, and D. That the men have turned into wolves and again restored to their original form. We must confidently look upon this as untrue, unless indeed we are ready to believe all tales, which for so many ages have been found to be fabulous, but as the belief of it has become so firmly fixed in the minds of the common people, as to have caused a type of versipellis to be used as a common form of impraction. I will here point out the origins. Pliny mentioned, shortly after mentioning the race of dog-headed men, that the belief in werewolves is foolishness. So again, I will believe in these dog-headed men because so many people have seen them. Hell, maybe he has even seen them. We do not know, since the burning of the Library of Alexander, I bet you documentation had been stored of possibly these men coming into these cities, even in Babylonia, they had them. A different culture, different tribe, but same race, quite possibly. Pliny mentioned shortly after mentioning he seems to have believed their evidence of one or none of the other. This echoes the perspective of Herodotus. Pliny mentions of Cynocephali is somewhat brief compared to the ancient scholar he references, but he isn't the only Roman scholar of his time to mention these creatures. Pomenosus Mala, in the island of Cynocephali, which lies off the coast of India, there is a race of men who have heads of dogs and bodies of men. They are said to be very friendly and to be good friends with the Indians. Cynocephali. So now, instead of saying, hey, these things are in the mountains, there's an island of them. And this is where, we'll get to it eventually, this is where I believe this island is where Marco Polo has his meeting with these creatures. Pampanosus mentions the dog-headed race as living on an island off the coast of India. Rather than pointing out the details about the creature in question, he chooses to focus on the fact that they are friendly. There is a Greek historian who said something similar around the same time, although it agrees with the writers previously mentioned. It spurs much disagreement between modern scholars. However, modern scholars are not the only ones arguing against these authors who describe the creature. A fascinating account is given by Strabo, who spoke against the existence of Cynocephali. Strabo, 64 or 63 BC to 24 AD, was a Greek geographer and historian who lived in Asia Minor during the transitional period of the Roman Republic into the Roman Empire. He is best known for his work Geography, which is a detailed description of the known world in his time. In this work, he, although clearly ridiculing the belief of these creatures, provides one of the only written accounts stating that Hesiod wrote of a race of half-dog men. Geography 7:3. But this ignorance in Homer's case is not amazing. For those who have lived later than he have been ignorant of many things, and have invented marvelous tales. Hesiod, when he speaks of men who are half dog, 44 of long-headed men, and of pygmies, and Alcamen, when he speaks of webbed-footed men, when he speaks of these dog-headed men, of these men with eyes in their breasts, and a one-eyed man in his Prometheus, and other hosts of tales. So, I know, I'm not going to speak for anybody, I have seen different accounts, and I'm assuming many of you guys have seen different accounts. What he's saying, he's comparing these creatures, dogmen or Cynocephali, to pygmies, which we know there is pygmies. They found them. Long-headed men, we have found skeletons of these heads that are just long and inverted. Webbed foot men, mermen, or there's even a medical case of people having webbed feet. And then the eyes of their breasts. So here's what I'm thinking he's talking about. There's depictions of these creatures that are just like, you chop my head off, you level it here, and their face is, they're like where their breasts would be their eyes, and where their stomach would be this mouth. And that's, I forget the name of the creature, there's a specific name for it. But that's what he's describing. And then he's describing a cyclops. Hesiod was a Greek author and poet from the 8th century BC, making him the oldest author to potentially ever mention these creatures. Through his writings containing no such descriptions, along with much of his work, a long-gone Strabo gives us reason to believe he did in fact write about them. Strabo writes of Hesiod's mention of these creatures, looking down on its foolishness, so it's highly unlikely that he is lying or even misinformed. The very nature of Strabo's polemic work is the strongest argument for the existence of such material by Hesiod known to date. And then we're going to jump into 2nd century AD. Aelian Claudius was a Roman author, a teacher of rhetoric, who lived in the 2nd century AD, best known for his work of Varia Historia, a collection of anecdotes and stories about animals, plants, and people. Aelian's on the Nature of Animals, Book 5. In the same part of India are found the creatures we call dogheads, a name that they earn because that is how they look. They have human shape, but they are clothed in fur. They walk upright. They are no threat to humans. They howl instead of speaking, but they understand language of people. They chase down wild animals very easily, cook them, and eat them. Cook them not with flame, but simply tearing them apart and letting the sun sear the meat. They keep goat and sheep for milk. I include them among beasts logically, since their language is unintelligible to human. Alien's description should seem familiar by now. He points out the methods of communication, cooking, and preferred food. Again, India is where he mentions them living. In the same part, India, he's referring to the mountainous region, same as Alien's writing, and Julius Solinus spoke up on the strange topic. Solinus, better known, or Julius Solinus, or better known as Solinus, was a Latin geographer and grammarian and compiler, probably flourished in the 3rd century AD, best known for his work, The Wonders of the World, or I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce Latin. It has been 36 years since my last Latin class, which circulated both under the title Collection of Curiosities. In an island of Cynocephali, there lies off the coast of India, there are men whose heads are dogs and bodies of men. They are said to be very intelligent and able to speak the language of the Indians. So now we have a kind of a dispute in this, but I think quite possibly what he meant is maybe understood the language of the native people of India. So, could be. And then there is Ptolemy. Ptolemy was born in Alexandria, Egypt, to a family of astronomers. He studied mathematics, astronomy, and philosophy at the Museum of Alexandria, which was the center of learning in the ancient world, had the reputation to uphold, even more so than any of these others. Yet he too etches his name to the following statement. Ptolemy. In the interior of Ethiopia there is a race of men who have heads of dogs and bodies of men. They are said to be very savage and live by hunting and eating raw flesh. While these writings are far from first-hand accounts, they have credibility in and of themselves. These writings seem to shoot down the argument one might have about motive. These men are well-respected individuals. Much like those who have wrote the original statements, they had little to gain and so much to lose in terms of their reputations, especially back then. I mean, the Library of Alexandria, the center of learning is the museum. You were born of a family of astronomers. Like, their name is everything, just like it should be to everyone. You know what I mean? Like our word is our only thing we really truly have. So like this back then, why would he so much to lose? So much to lose, yet not much to gain by talking about these. 5th century AD, St. Augustine. Augustine, city of God. He rides the line. All right, so St. Augustine doesn't doesn't say they exist and doesn't say they don't exist. All he does is stay kind of the middle course. City of God. Wherefore, to conclude this question cautiously and guardedly, either these things which have been told of some races have no existence at all, or if they do exist, they are not human race, or if they are human, they are descendant of Adam. He, not knowing for sure, points out, not everything should be taken at simple word of many, nor should it be outwardly denied on the grounds of unlikelihood. Augustine once again states, it is also asked whether we are to believe that certain monstrous races of men spoken in secular history have sprung from Noah's sons, or rather, I should say, from that one man from whom they themselves were descended. What shall I say of the Cynocephali, whose dog-like head and barking proclaim them beasts rather than men? But we are not bound to believe all we hear of these monstrosities. By the 5th century, it seems the existence of the Cynocephali is in question by some and still professed by others. Augustine acknowledges a popular topic. Isidore of Seville, 7th century. I also I wanted to share this really quick before we go any further. When we were talking in regards to Strabo, where he had mentioned, but this ignorance in Homer's case is not amazing. For those who have lived later than he have been ignorant to so many things and have invented marvelous tales. Hesiod, when he speaks of men half dog, long-head men, pygmy, and speaks of web-footed men, men with eyes in their breasts, and one-eyed men. So I had kind of said, we've all heard of these creatures. Well, it's the blemis, or blemis, and it's a Scottish Highland kind of creature, and that's what I was talking about. And so, but, I mean, you have to think, we are talking about Rome, which expanded. It was huge. So, like, it wasn't just, tales from Scotland and England and such were incorporated into Roman discussion and lore and whatnot. So I just wanted to share that before we got any further. Once again, I apologize for jumping back. Isidore of Seville, 560 to April 4th, 636. A Hispano-Roman scholar, theologian, Archbishop of Seville. Widely regarded, in the words of the 19th century historian Montalembert, as the last scholar of the ancient world. Isidore, a skilled diplomat, he helped negotiate peace between the Visigoths and the Byzantine Empire. He was a wise and learned man, respected both Christian and Muslim. His most famous works was the Etymologies, the vast encyclopedia of knowledge that is divided into 20 books. Etymologies covers a wide range of topics, including grammar, rhetoric, philosophy, and theology, and natural science. Popular work in the Middle Ages is used by scholars and students for centuries. This is what he states. Just as individual nations, there are instances of monstrous people, so in the whole of humankind, there are certain monstrous races, like the giants, the Cynocephali, the Cyclops, and others. The Cynocephali are so called because they have dog head, and their barking indeed reveals that they are rather beast than human. These originate in India. Now we're getting closer to Abu Abdullah Muhammad al-Idrisi, also known simply as al-Idrisi, was a Muslim geographer and cartographer, just a person who studies maps. Served in the court of King Roger II at Palermo, Sicily. He was born in Ceuta, belonging to a Almoravid dynasty, one of the most advanced medieval world map makers. He writes in a book about the maps called Kitab. I'm not even going to attempt to speak Muslim, but the book translates to the Book of Pleasant Excursions to the Regions of the World. The book is a description of the world, and it includes information about geography, history, and culture in different regions. In this book, he writes of the Cynocephali as being in China and actually able to speak Chinese. In the land of China, there is a race of men who have heads of dogs and the bodies of men. They are very intelligent and able to speak Chinese. Al-Idrisi wasn't the only to claim Cynocephaly was in Asia. Later, Marco Polo actually made a claim of a fierce group of creatures living outside of Great Khan's territory. So, this is where I believe we start to see the kind of advent or whatever to what we have as modern day Dogman from Cynocephaly to now. Marco Polo, as everyone knows, Venetian merchant and explorer, traveled to Asia along the Silk Road between 1271 and 1295. His travels were recorded in the Travels of Marco Polo, the book that describes for Europeans the wonders of China, its capital Peking, now Beijing, and other cities and countries around Asia. Marco Polo writes, "In the land of Lofoian, which is near the Great Khan's dominions, there are men who have heads of dogs and bodies of men. They are said to be very fierce and live by hunting." Whether or not Marco Polo saw these creatures himself, we do not know, but their existence was still clearly believed in China in his lifetime. Vincent of Beauvius, a French Dominican friar and encyclopedist, living from 1188 to 1264, best known for his Speculum Maius, a massive encyclopedia that was one of the most important works of scholarship in the Middle Ages. Brilliant worker, thinker, prolific writer. His work had a profound impact on the development of scholarship and education in the Middle Ages. He is considered one of the most important figures in the history of the Dominican order. He speaks of Cynocephaly as being off the coast of India, much like others. There are men with dog head. They are said to inhabit the island of Cynocephali, which is situated off the coast of India. The next one is rather interesting. 14th century, John Mandeville. Now, historians believe that there is no evidence that he existed. Officially, the work that he wrote is believed to be fiction written by an anonymous author in the 14th to 15th century. Because the book is titled The Travels of Sir John Mandeville, which was one of the most popular books in the Middle Ages. The book describes Mandeville's travels to Asia, Africa, and the Middle East. This book, however, fantastical as it may be, irrefutably contains perfect, accurate information alongside the fantastical. In fact, this work was even used as reference by Columbus. It describes well-known nations and people, their beliefs, Their alphabets, it's also written from a Catholic perspective, which is interesting. The work mentioned Cynocephali in considerable detail, the beginning of which is as follows. Men and women on an isle have heads of dogs. They are called Cynocephales. These people, despite their shape, are fully responsible and intelligent. Also mentions their culture, religion, weapons, clothing, kingship. One of the least credible sources of information on them, but still plausible. Now, there's something that I had researched and had read somewhere, and I don't remember where, but supposedly, I want to say it was Marco Polo, and I do believe it was. Supposedly Marco Polo had come across the Cynocephali in his travels and had traded with them because he described the vast amounts of purple, which was mentioned by many other scholars and writers previous in BC and in AD. But he mentions how they were very intelligent, yet they didn't speak. They used their barks and like a dog, like a whimper and whatever, however a dog communicates, along with their hand gestures and stuff. But eventually, and this is what I shared last night, eventually these creatures were then taken advantage of because they were not warlike. They were not fighters. They were hunters. And because of this, humans took from them and didn't give back, didn't trade the bread and whatever they used to trade for. Humans said, nah, screw that. They are beast, we are humans. And a result of that caused them to flee away from humanity and not trade with the traders that they used to trade with and go deeper into the wilderness. Now, with that being said, why wouldn't these things, like I said, the advent of what we have now, you have a peaceful tribe of dog-like humans, dog-headed humans that traded, were intelligent and this and that, and worked along with humans, like shared in life. Then humans betrayed and took advantage of and probably killed a shit ton of them. And then they went into the woods. And so when humans went into the woods, what automatically would these creatures think? They're here to invade our space. We don't have much. We just want, our land that is here so we can hunt and live. And then bam, they would attack humans. And then eventually, as the world just got bigger and more people, then they became possibly more just the way I described it, but now coming out of the woods. We hear how there are attacks. There's attacks and there's people that have been killed, numerous people. Yet they also are inquisitive on things, looking through windows, attacking livestock and feeding on it. But, maybe it's their way now to just look at humanity and study us, figure out what we are, who we are. I'm assuming that if there is communication, wouldn't there be like history? I highly doubt that, because a lot of these historians talk about them being intelligent, talk about them, if you're trading with humans and using amber and purple dye and this and that and spices and why wouldn't they be able to transcribe or somehow keep track of the history of their kind? So being well aware of what humanity did to them, I'd be chapped too, you know. Here are some historical books and manuscripts that we can find the Cynocephali mentioned in. First would be like the Kiev Psalter, 14th century book. Kiev Psalter of 1397, one of the most famous East Slavic illuminated manuscripts containing over 300 miniature kind of descriptions, illustrations, and such. And there is descriptions of armed Cynocephali depicted as peacefully speaking to Jesus, such a strange combination, men with dog heads holding spears and shields, like we've heard back in India, but they are talking to Jesus. They're in the Catholic Church, but this is surprising, as strange. It's not alone. The Barbanini Psalter, the 11th century. This book is, I believe it's an Italian book, if I'm not mistaken. Deluxe illuminated Christian prayer book. It's Greek, I think. Yeah, it is Greek. So in this, we see photos of armed Cynocephali, again, talking with Jesus. Then you have the Rothschild Canticles, a lavishly illuminated manuscript book of hours, compiled Flanders between 15 to 1520, named after the Rothschild family, who acquired it in the 19th century. There's a reason why they acquired books like that, right? We all know that. The illustrations, Cynocephali, along with other descriptions, strange depictions. There's just a lot of different kind of not photos, but depictions of Cynocephali in these books and such. And then we can get to one of the most strangest, I think, and I've done a whole video about this, St. Christopher. Now, my view on that is, well, I'll share the info first, and then St. Christopher has a very strange story of how he became a saint. It involves converting Cynocephali that he encounters. We know now that the concept existing within the minds of Catholics, but Christopher became a connection to the whole collection of evidence. Passion of St. Christopher, translated by William Henry Holm, 1889. I saw a race of men who had heads of dogs. Their teeth were sharp, like the teeth of lions. They were very strong and fierce, and they ate human flesh. This quote is from The Passion of St. Christopher, a text written after the close of the Renaissance that tells a story of the saint's life. In the story, Christopher encounters a group of dog-headed people while he traveled through the forest. The Cynocephali are initially hostile to him, but they eventually befriend him, and he help them convert to Christianity. Now, people may say, there's different beliefs on why or how he is depicted. Why would he be depicted as a dog-headed canine human? And now some folks say that because he was a Canaanite, that it was a error in translation in Latin, canine Canaanite. But here's the thing with that. Historically, it is written that Christopher was very tall. And I'm not exactly sure. Nobody really knows how tall he was, but he was supposedly very tall. So I've heard 8 to 9 feet in height. I had talked to a Russian Orthodox priest and Russian Catholic Orthodox, or Russian Orthodox Catholic, or Christian. And he talked to me about, that he was the one that told me he was like 8 or 9 feet in height. Really interesting conversation with him. I've tried to have one with a Roman Catholic priest, and he just dismissed me, which kind of ass-chapped me a little bit. But what my belief and understanding is that if St. Christopher, or Christopher at that time, he was a Canaanite. And we know that in the Bible, the Nephilim are as powerful giant offspring between the sons of God, or the daughters of sons of God, and human women, appearing both before and after the Great Flood. The Canaanites, an ancient people of Levant, are also associated with the Nephilim, particularly through the descendants, the Anakim, who were known of great stature. So supposedly St. Christopher was an Anakim, or of great stature, very tall. But here's the thing. Here's something interesting to think about. Supposedly, as we've talked many times on the channel, and once again, this is a science based on theory and firsthand accounts, just mainly theory, and really looking at the history like we just did. My belief is that because the Canaanites were descendants of the Nephilim, supposedly, now we know that the fallen angels, not only did they breed with the daughter of man, but they did genetic experimentation on animals, creating half animal, half human creatures. Dogmen are half human, half animal creatures, supposedly. So with that being said, it would make interesting sense in theory that Christopher being a Canaanite would be, quite possibly, he did have a dog head. Right? So then you've got all these illustrations going back from the 14th century of these dog-headed Cynocephali talking to Jesus peacefully. What if they were approaching Jesus to say, hey, we have a man who is whole and pure. He looks like us, but he loves God. He loves Catholic Christianity. He preaches it and this and that. Can you help him? Can you transform him to a human? And what if by chance that's the reason why? We see those depictions of these Cynocephali soldiers possibly talking to Jesus, helping St. Christopher become human, or he was a human that helped the Cynocephali, and as a punishment was turned into a Cynocephali by God. There's two different theories on why, but if you really think about it, Canaanite, I don't really see the really large possibility of there being a mistranslation in Canaanite or Canaan and canine. Yes, they look similar, sound similar, spelled differently, but I just don't see educated, well-versed men of that time mistranslating something and then leaving it. So either it could have been that he was born a Cynocephali, and why we see these Cynocephali talking to Jesus, these soldiers of the Cynocephali race talking to Jesus in depictions. Maybe they approached him and said, hey, we have a friend, a man who teaches us Christianity. Can you reward him and help him become human? That's all he wants. Or because God really was pissed and, almost like that great flood punishment. Oh, you want to talk to the children of the Nephilim, the grandchildren of the descendants of the Nephilim. You want to turn them and help them become Christians without praying to me first, or possibly, we don't know, but pretty good theory. Here, I'm going to turn you into one if you want to bed talk with these things and eat with them and break bread with them. And, I didn't mean bed with them like human angel, but I meant like just sit with them, break bread. Here, I will turn you into, because the God of the Old Testament was kind of a punishing God. So who knows? Who knows? Or maybe it was just lost in translation. I don't know. But like I said, we have groups of descendants, the Anakim and other giant-like groups in Canaan. And then you have the Raphim, which were remnants or descendants of the pre-flood Nephilim. So who really knows? It's theory, it's speculation, and it's quite possibly the history of Dogman. I know that, I just wanted to share what I knew and the information that I've compiled with you guys and put it all out there, because to me, it all needs to be out there to make our theories more plausible to us. And knowing the history of all of the depictions and descriptions of the Cynocephali, it's kind of hard to even say Dogman doesn't exist now. And there you have it, folks. I hope you all enjoyed this second and night-ending bonus as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. I'd like to thank you for supporting the channel. It is your support that helps the channel to continue to grow and go, and what gives us all a place and a chance to share our experiences and theories judgment-free. Everyone is simply treated with the respect that we deserve. Please stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant, keeping an eye on our children, pets, our family, and our friends. These creatures are real. These events, well, they've happened. Share this information with those you love and care about, and it may just help save their lives someday. Until next time, never stop asking questions. Never stop searching for the truth, and God bless you all.